Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Digital Adoption Show, where we host top L&D, HR, and tech luminaries and talk about what's next in the future of work at tech. Today, we are here with a panel of experts sharing their experiences and insights. And the first question we're going to be answering is: are AI avatars the future of learning and development? To discuss this topic, we have a very special guest who talks about AI avatars like they're the next of his kin. Since the topic of our discussion revolves around this subject, it's fitting to invite Kevin Alster. He's the head of Synthesia Academy. Kevin is a recognized name as emerging tech enthusiast obsessed with technology, learning, and design. At General Assembly, Kevin developed an enterprise identity solutions helping businesses humanize tech integration. And now at Synthesia, he teaches others how to use synthetic humans and AI for workplace learning. In the first segment, Kevin speaks about his journey by reflecting on his childhood desire for having a twin, which parallels to their current work with digital twins and avatars. Kevin also speaks about the customizations option available for creating AI avatars, including translation and other unique features, and also shares examples of successful use cases where different companies have used AI avatars effectively.
This morning I was reflecting on how I want to tell my story, and I kind of had this epiphany that since I've been little, I've always wanted a twin. If I could have a twin, then one of us could have gone to school, the other one could have relaxed. Maybe later on in life, we could have learned different languages, different instruments, or make different groups of friends. And then the secret would be we wouldn't tell anyone, and everybody would be so impressed. But I was thinking, this is so perfect because this is what ties me to like the future of avatars and digital twins. I didn't even know what it was back then, but I knew that I wanted it. Before Synthesia, I'd been in education and learning. So my first career was a kindergarten teacher, then moved into ed tech and then corporate learning and also branded learning, which I think has some interesting ties to the work that I do now. But I had just moved to Copenhagen at the time. I was doing corporate reskilling and upskilling. And 2 days after I moved in, this other person moved into my apartment. And that would be the person who is now the head of product marketing, but at this time was a very small company. And he was like, hey, we're looking for someone with an L&D background. You should meet the founders. So I met Victor and Stefan. So that's kind of what brought me to Synthesia, and that was 3 years ago. It's a lucky story, one that I think is a bit serendipitous, I think is the word I'm going to go with. So what are AI avatars? I think it's important to mention that AI avatars are human models. They're models that are created from real footage of actors, and they're animated using AI that's interpreting the written words or the typed words that you put in. And so what our tech at Synthesia does at a very high level is that it reads the words that people have typed in, and it interprets those words and sentences, and it uses them to generate an AI voice that should sound realistic, animate the avatar, and then give it the expressiveness that's based on the context and the tone of that script. And I think it's something that's important to mention because there have been different types of animated characters, or that's not something that is unusual in L&D. But I think what we've seen in the past 2 years or so is how AI avatars have really changed how we generate things like talking head videos, or who are these characters that we have in our learning experiences. But what they've been in the past is kind of like these really static, kind of awkward stock images. But now, if you're able to type in text, you're able to generate essentially a talking head video or a character. And so how we're seeing it having an impact on L&D is in many ways. But I think first and foremost, starting with the simplest, is that L&D has, whether that's courses or resources or different types of digital learning, there's a need to use video as a way to deliver that information. And I'm not a person who thinks that we should use the video for everything, but if you need to create video, how would you have to do that in the past? You'd have to storyboard it out, you'd have to script it out, you'd have to then record yourself, or you had to be on camera, or even worse, I've had the terrible experience of having to coach subject matter experts who were not ready for camera to try and be on camera. And then you edit it down. Once you're done with that, then you have this MP4 file that you then put into your LMS or however you're delivering that content. But then as that video starts to live online, it starts to age. Maybe things go out of date. And if you need to make a change, then you need to go back and you need to re-record that. When you are talking about AI video or using AI avatars, if you need to switch voiceover, or if you need to translate into multiple languages, or you just need to make content up to date, you can now just click a button rather than me having to hire an editor. So the first and foremost use case is this idea of you can use AI avatars to generate video faster. if you do e-learning or digital learning of any type and you use video, it's very easy to put avatars into an AI video as a way to optimize your workflow, to make this work of creating the content go faster. But really, a big part of this is just saving people time. It costs so much time to create these things. There's a lot of other use cases as well, but I think that time and cost savings of creating the actual video is kind of the main key use for these AI avatars. Well, when it comes to customization, I think where we're at with the technology now, you could maybe add a logo to a shirt or maybe even change the color of the clothes that you're wearing, but you couldn't make these really big changes like to the hair or to the face. There are two technologies that we have for creating these personal avatars. The first is to use essentially phone camera footage or webcam footage to then record the human performance. You read a script, and then you're able to turn that into an avatar and translate your script or your text into multiple languages in your voice. We also have higher quality production. And so this is for leaders at companies who often make maybe monthly or quarterly addresses to a global company, or their face as a brand within the company. We actually have those folks go to a studio. We record their avatar against a green screen, and what that allows you to do is change the backgrounds or the environments or the spaces that those avatars are in. But yeah, that's essentially how the tech works. So it's very limited customization at the moment, but the good news is that it's easy to create a personal avatar, meaning you can just do that with your webcam or your phone. It's very much at the beginning of this adoption curve. So we're still seeing what folks can create. It's exciting. The examples that I think are the best use of this tool boil down to three different buckets. So one of them is bringing skills, thinking about an experience. Some of them are about communication and how we use video communication. And one of them is about more so kind of time or cost to delivery. And so I think the one that's my favorite and the one that I want to start with is we work with Zoom, who they have a lot of courses and resources for sales enablement training, where a lot of those courses are built in Articulate, Storyline, and Rise. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create interactive courses and resources that can ultimately help them save on face-to-face training time. Because as you can imagine, pulling people away from their desks, from their computers to sit in the training actually is a huge cost to the company. And so what they've done is one of their instructional designers for this particular skill that they were teaching, he built these really interactive stories where he has this one called the Deal Detective, where he's created this entire story world where the learner is in the role of a detective, and they have to figure out where a deal has broken down and who they can question to save it. So there are different suspects, which are different stakeholders in this journey. There's different clues that they might find, but really they've used the avatars rather than just kind of having these flat pictures. They've used the avatars and they've used music to kind of really build this world and create this rich experience that not only gives the employees a chance to practice these skills, but it also kind of gives them motivation to continue in the story. DuPont, who is moving post-pandemic from virtual instructor-led training, because during the pandemic, we're all in our computers and training shifted mostly to online. What they did is they wanted to use these transcripts to create asynchronous courses that they could deliver at scale, but they didn't have the video production resources needed to hire out an external company. And so rather than paying around $15,000 per video, because it has to be corporate and polished and really a high production experience, they're able to bring those skills in-house. And what I like about the story is that the L&D team now has a new service offering for the rest of the company, where before they were just kind of curriculum designers. Now they're able to kind of build solutions end to end because they have that video experience. So that speaks to the more sort of, again, that idea of cost or time to create something. And then I think the last one for me was Heineken, it's more a general HR strategy that they have, where the tagline that our champion uses that they call PowerPoints poison points because everybody uses them and nobody pays attention. And so they're shifting their internal communication strategy from using these 45-minute webinar recordings to these short bite-sized videos that employees can download and watch on their own time. And they're experimenting with it as a way to have avatars deliver information.
Those were some amazing insights from Kevin on AI avatars and embracing the future of learning with AI driven innovations. In the next segment, we are joined by Andrew, a seasoned professional with over 13 years of experience in L&D, also had some sales roles in medtech and pharmaceutical industries, primarily at J&J, Johnson& Johnson. Now, as the Director of Global Commercial Learning and Development at Gilead Sciences, Andrew leads global strategy, curriculum development, and best practices for the company's commercial and medical affairs teams. He speaks about his journey, shares insights on creating effective learning strategies, how organizations can measure ROI in L&D to ensure impactful results, how do you balance standardization with personalization in global curriculum design, what challenges have they faced in identifying competencies and ensuring continuous learning, and how they overcame that. And lastly, he also speaks about if there's any difference in how L&D is strategized across various business units and what their approach was.
It's been a journey over the past 13 years for sure. And I never really necessarily knew what I wanted to do when I was in college, but I figured out very shortly after going into the business school at Xavier University in Cincinnati that I definitely wanted to be connected with what I was doing. And that led me to sales, specifically pharmaceutical or med tech sales, where you could really see the impact of the product that you were using live, both with customers and patients. And that's what led me to my first role within global learning and development in a program called the Sales Training Representative Program at Johnson & Johnson, which is really an entry-level program to get people into the sales organizations at large med tech and pharmaceutical companies. I did that role for about 18 months and then transitioned into med tech sales. And I was a med tech sales rep for a number of years. I spanned markets from Kentucky to West Virginia and Northeast Ohio. During that time, I had a lot of really great experiences across med tech at Johnson & Johnson. And that led me back into training, a training manager role, which I think is a pretty typical pathway for most individuals in pharmaceutical and med tech. My passion has been learning and development for a long time. I don't think I necessarily realized it when I went back into learning and development, but very quickly I realized the passion behind really taking the time to help people understand and see people understand and see people really flourish and be successful. And that led me to a couple other decisions in my career, very much guided by mentors over the years around how do I continue to expand my knowledge and competencies within the learning and development space, continue to learn about the organizations that I work in. And so for the next several years, I focused in on several acquisitions within Johnson & Johnson. So several organizations that were acquired by Johnson & Johnson, looking at how training was integrated, looking at really the different cultures was the development opportunity for me, seeing how things were done outside of J&J without leaving J&J, which led me to another role with one of Johnson & Johnson's acquisitions at Johnson & Johnson Surgical Vision. Having the opportunity to lead a sales training org and build that organization at Johnson & Johnson Surgical Vision, which it was known at the time. Had a really great 2.5 years at that organization and then transferred over to pharmaceutical back into a sales role. One of the things that I realized early on was I wanted to make sure that I was really diversifying my experience and looking at gaps. And one of the areas that I knew that I hadn't experienced yet was the pharmaceutical sector. So I had the opportunity to go over to the pharmaceutical sector and be part of a team that had just started up. And that team really coordinated strategy between all the different functions within the organization, med affairs, sales, marketing, or contracting groups. And I was really happy at the time in my role, but had an opportunity pop up. Somebody reached out to me and had an opportunity to compete for a role where I'm at today, Gilead Sciences, which brought me back into the learning and development world. And then for a lot of personal reasons, gave us a lot of opportunity to change the location we lived and try something new. And shortly after that, we ended up in California, and that's where we are today. And as many of the learning and development professionals know that have to work with global teams, a really challenging question to answer. And this is one of the things that I've been working on since I stepped into the new organization I'm a part of. There's a lot of really unique reasons why I chose to pursue the opportunity I'm in today. And one of those reasons was looking at creating a global learning and development team and contributing to a global learning and development team that was really in almost a startup type phase, hadn't existed for a long period of time, was still being established and still growing. And so a lot of the barriers that you see in larger organizations weren't necessarily there or were very different here in the role I am today. So one of the things that when I stepped in was really took a look at, if we're going to do things on a global perspective, I knew from prior experiences, the organization couldn't just create and deliver things on a global scale, right? There's an amount of contextualization that's needed on a global market level, but there's also a lot of stuff that can be done on the global level that can assist our global partners in deploying content or information to their markets. And really what it comes down to is a little bit around competence versus confidence and competitive nature in the marketplace. And so one of the things that we've been doing, and one of the things that we've really focused in on that's gained a lot of momentum, is understanding where at a global organization can we make things easier from a competence and confidence perspective, so that the global marketplace can really focus on the confidence piece, which has a lot of nuances in many different countries, but also really own the competitive piece to be competitive in their market. And they're really the only ones that can do that. So one of the strategies and the strategy that we've employed is get out of the way of the markets to allow them to own their marketplace and really accelerate where we can operationally and with core competence type material to allow them to do that. And we are still very much in the early phases and building a really strong foundation to ensure that we can get ahead of a lot of these challenges. And if challenges do happen, we're really thinking thoroughly about how we navigate them to create long-term sustainability. So one of the main things we do is really garnish as many insights as possible from our global affiliates. And what we're doing is really trying to understand what their vision is, what they're trying to do, and where we can really reduce duplication globally. Because for a global organization, like global learning and development, that's a lot more about the strategy and operation versus the actual execution. There are a lot of things that we can do to help our global affiliates execute quicker. And that's where we're really focusing our time. And I think from other organizations, and I know from other organizations where a lot of the roadblocks came is global teams, whether they meant to do it, their intent was to do it or not, they started getting into the gray area of helping global affiliates execute. And I think that's where a lot of global organizations will hit a lot of roadblocks, slow down, or quite frankly, be unsuccessful, is when they can't provide value to something that somebody else really should own from a knowledge perspective. And so when we look at the scale of what we've been doing globally of some of the terms, competence, confidence, and competitiveness, and we just know that from a global scale, no matter what markets we worked in, we'll never be able to, on a day-to-day basis, keep up with the information flowing in from global affiliates around how they can make their people competent and how they can make their people competitive. So it's very much a story that's continuing, but where we've been able to start focusing a lot of our time is that operational piece. And that is, how do we create courses that drive competence? How do we create shells of course help drive confidence for our global affiliates, no matter where they may be in the world? How do we provide baseline metrics and data, not only baseline metrics and data using our learning enablement system, but also work to drive learning effectiveness within their organization so they can start to tell a story about not only the value of training people as they come in for new hires, but really that 70% of on-the-job training that needs to continue beyond a new hire coming in and onboarding. So we've been able to do it a couple ways, and I'll just reiterate quickly, is really simplify what we're doing versus what our global affiliates are doing and getting out of the way of them driving confidence and competitiveness for their people, but also more importantly, really arming them with the information, the data, and the metrics to be able to tell the story to their leaders outside of learning and development, who we know don't always understand some of the intricacies or why we do what we do, to convince them that, hey, if you do things a certain way in learning and development, right, the speed to access to your customers will increase. The ability to coach competencies will be taken on faster by your learners. So there's a lot of different ways that we're employing, and we've been successful so far. We still have a very long journey to go, but we've been really successful in kind of segmenting those things so that we can allow people to really own what they are best at. There's a lot of nuances, whether you're in med tech or the pharmaceutical space. And I think that when you look at global organizations, we're looking at strategies for a lot of different business units. The organization I'm in now has several different therapeutic areas that absolutely have to be approached differently based on the end use of the drug or the product. Same in med tech as well, whether it's an implantable device or a single use item. There's definitely nuances along the way, and that's something that really has to be accounted for. And again, we look at this scale of where we can help globally, whether it's competence, confidence, or competitiveness. And it brings in a little bit of another layer around, what is best for a specific therapeutic area. And I think that a lot of that, again, comes into play once you move more towards, application or building confidence and then competitiveness in the marketplace. And so using the same strategy as we're looking at from a global scale and what type of content we put out, when you look at the different therapeutic areas, the goal at the end of the day is to let the therapeutic areas own their strategy. Now, we can't put out content for every single therapeutic area for every single country and have thousands of pieces of content. But again, as we look across, there are just so many similarities in terms of content and duplication. And I think this gets more into the design of how we're designing content. I always make the analogy, and I took this from a prior manager of mine years ago, that learning and development is a little bit like Disney World or Disneyland, if you're familiar and you've been in the US. Other than the caricatures, which are basically sales trainers, right? If you think about it, you don't really see any other employees running around on the grounds. That's because there's tunnels underneath Disney in Disneyland, and most of the employees are running around like crazy under there, making sure everybody has a good experience. That is learning and development. And so although we may show up as a single course or a single training, what we have to do to get there is incredibly complicated. And so I would answer this question in the end with, it's about how we design things and how we deploy those. So in terms of how we design those things, I'm taking a very modular approach to ensure that we're designing very specific tools and resources so we can sub things out where needed. I think is incredibly important. And to be able to do that, we really have to understand where those distinct differences are. And then on the deployment side, right, we can deploy that all as one piece of material, but we've taken the time and we built the foundation to the background to really identify, again, the pieces that are all standardized, regardless of therapeutic area or regardless of country, all the way down to, hey, this is one single piece of material that we have that we know probably needs to be contextualized by country, by therapeutic area. And the discussion more becomes, is this really something that global should be creating, or is this a piece that we can rely on our global affiliates who know best to create? And so there is some complexity in the background, but again, what it enables us to do is to allow our affiliates to go to market quickly because they're the ones that are responsible for the execution piece. And so a lot of moving parts to that, right? We have to bring in the right people to really look at how we organize our data and how we have a global content catalog to inform our decisions. But really looking at, again, that Disney World approach, how are we setting ourselves up in the tunnels to be able to deploy content in a way that's going to give a really great user experience? I think one danger that I've seen in the past, and I will say this, is a lot of times what I see is a big piece of content be put out for one specific area. Now, the user should always see one big piece of content in terms of learning about the disease state of HIV, right? That's probably one course that a user goes into and feels that that's one course they're going into. It feels continuous. But as we look at it from a content perspective, we may need to break that down into a couple different pieces of parts in the background, because again, that's going to enable us to go to market a lot quicker and enable us to tailor the things that we need to tailor.
And with that, we wrap today's conversation. It's clear that both AI and L&D hold transformative power in shaping the future of work, whether through AI avatars bringing personalized learning experiences to life, or strategic global L&D programs enhancing the skills and competencies across the teams. These innovations are setting new standards for engagement and growth in the workplace. Thank you to our guests who brought in those amazing insights, and thank you to our listeners who have joined us on this episode. We encourage you to explore similar insightful episodes on the Digital Adoption Show, available across all your platforms platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. I am your host, Disha Suresh, signing off with new episodes coming in every week. Stay tuned for more interesting and insightful ones to come.